Welcome to the first episode of season 3 of Dead Headspace. We are with Richard Chizmar. Say hi, Rich.
Hello. How you guys doing?
Pretty good. And my co-host, Brennan LaFaro. Say hi, Brennan.
Hello, everybody.
And I am Patrick R. McDonough. We are a part of Silver Shamrock's Horrorcast, a podcast network that includes Killing Time with Silver Shamrock and Burying the Dead, where we exhume classic horror paperbacks for the new generation. So, Rich, before we started recording, we were talking about when we had you on the first time last year, and it's a lot. It was almost a year.
Right.
It's February, beginning of February. So a lot's happened since then. One of them being this book right here. For audio listeners, I'm holding hardback of Chasing the Boogeyman. This is an amazing book in every way imaginable. But before Brian and I give our kind of our opinion on it, further than that, I want to hear from you, man. What's it been like? The reception, the love, and so forth.
It's been cool. Boogeyman was a weird book because it's such a personal thing, and it wasn't the book I was supposed to be writing. I like my agent and I had a phone conference and we talked about different ideas, and I narrowed it down to a couple and was like, I think I'll probably jump on this one. And then we kind of just didn't talk about books for a while. She was doing her thing, I was doing mine, and was busy with various things. And this book just kept kind of bugging me to be written. So I was like, you know what, I'll go ahead and write it and I'll surprise her. And yeah, I did. I mean, I still remember making the phone call and saying, so I wrote this really personal kind of old-fashioned campfire story, and I'm the main character, and I don't know how the hell that happened. And yeah, there was kind of like silence on the other end. And then she's like, well, we'll send it on and we'll see, but yeah, she ended up digging it. And she called me back a couple weeks later and she's like, you won me over. Because there were a lot of questions about the book before she had read it. She's like, well, what if editors like it, but don't want you to be the main character? And I was like, I guess we'll see, because I'm a behind the scenes kind of guy. I don't get out much. So I think she was very surprised that I decided to put myself into the book. But it's just the way it all happened. So yeah, a long-winded way of saying that everything for Boogeyman from the start was kind of just a really cool surprise. I thought it might be this little book that a handful of people read and appreciated because it was kind of, it's an old-fashioned throwback story, and it ended up surprising everybody. So that was cool.
Yeah, you know what? Go ahead, Brian.
I was going to say, was there ever a version of the book, even if it only lived in your mind, where you weren't the main character?
You know what? Only in the very beginning. I mean, when I started writing the intro piece, the part about, kind of covering some ground and introducing what was supposed to be, the Boogeyman book that I wrote back in 1988 or back in 1990, rather. Literally the first couple paragraphs, I was writing as this unnamed narrator. But by the time I got like a page in, I realized it was me. And I was like, you know what? I'm not gonna be able to fake this time that I'm not writing about myself. And I was like, that's the thing. A lot of true crime books are written by people who actually, were involved on the peripheral, or it happened in their town. So I was, and that was kind of the catalyst for it, is my love of true crime books and my respect for the guys and women who write those, because it's such a responsibility. And that was it. I was just like, got halfway through page one and I was like, okay, it's got to be me. And then I had the idea of having, a renowned true crime writer actually write a foreword to the book. So kind of another layer to making it seem real. And I had James Renner do that. I really enjoy his work. So yeah, there was never, other than for like the first 20 minutes, there was no prior version that didn't have me. And it was just weird because I've never done that before. But it was, after the fact, after it had sold and got a nice advance, and the sale numbers pre-order numbers were up there. And, I started kind of getting some buzz for being smart. This is a really unique marketing tool you had. And I'm just like, man, I'm not smart enough to do that. It's just the way it happened. And I was honest. I owned up to it. I was like, nah, I should lie. but it's just the way the story wanted to be told. I wanted to Blair Witch everybody, and I wanted to fake that, pretend like this was a real story. But Simon & Schuster's lawyers thought that was a very bad idea and talked me out of it. And originally my idea was this was the real deal. I had plans to do a website and make it look like a 1990s era website. And I was going to have fake newspaper articles planted online and the whole thing. And I was going to try to Blair Witch a literary audience. And the cool thing is it kind of worked out that way anyway. A lot of people said they still Googled things, and they, despite the fact that it said a novel right on front, they still believed it.
That intro itself, I was reading it just so I'm like, I know it's fake, but is it really fake? Because you just said you wrote some of it or was that part of the I don't know how else to do that. I just did air quotes for those audio listeners. Was it really you that wrote a short story called Boogeyman back in that era, or was that all part of the fake intro?
No, you know what? I had written a story called The Boogeyman, and it ended up being titled something else eventually. But yeah, I mean, everything that I wrote about, as far as my past, and Cemetery Dance magazine and how that started and my interactions with my friends and all those memories, those were real. I didn't embellish any of those. And about the town where I grew up, the history, like 90% of it was real. Every once in a while, and it could have been 100% real. Every once in a while, I just, I did research. So I had numbers as far as, how many troops were there and all that stuff. And every once in a while, I just, flip some numbers around, because I was like, you know what? That's the point of the whole book is the fact is fiction and fiction is fact in many ways. And I kind of just wanted to screw everything up. So, and the jazz club that I mentioned in the town's history, that didn't exist. That existed in the Black Spot, and I called it something else. But so, yeah, there was some homages to Stephen King's work in there, but everything other than the murders was pretty true.
It did. I don't know who said this, where I saw it first, but did it ever occur to you until someone said it that you're kind of making your own subgenre?
You know what? My agent and my editor both said that. They both said, trust me, however many months from now, you're going to start seeing other books like this coming out and being announced. And they have. Every time one is announced, they send me the clip or the announcement. They email it to me. And again, it's like people have said, and a couple of the writers who were kind enough to blurb it were like, you've invented a new genre. And I just kind of laugh. And I'm like, again, trust me, man, I'm not bright enough to do that. It was just a happy accident. Again, I'm not going to lie. That's bad karma. I wish I could say, I drank some good scotch and smoked some wonderful weed and had a vision, and I went on a vision quest and I invented this new kind of a way to tell a story, but none of that's true. It's just the way it happened, and even looking back at like Widow's Point, which some of the reviews said, that short book was kind of like the first found footage, one of the first found footage, novellas. And again, that's just the way the story wanted to be told. So it was not any brilliance on our part as far as planning or, having a really clear vision. It was just, I followed where the story went and that's where it went. So I got, a happy accident, and I was happy to kind of go along for the ride.
Brennan, you want to jump in?
You're pulling a Johnny Cash here. You're wearing black because you didn't have any other clothes. You're singing that way because you couldn't sing any better.
Yeah,
you gotta take that credit.
I hope it happened. Yeah, well, you know what? I figure if I don't take the credit, if I stay honest, then maybe that it'll keep happening.
There you go.
So, but yeah, no, it really, it's funny because my oldest son Billy, who is a writer and a filmmaker, and I talked to him a lot about it as I was writing it, and he helped me with the photographs. And he was the first person to say, "Dad, you cannot pretend this is true." And Billy is not a warrior in that regard. He's kind of, he's a typical 22-year-older where he's kind of flies by the hip. And so I was shocked that he was so concerned about it. And he's like, you're going to scare people in town, and he kept saying you're going to drive property values down if they think a serial killer used to live in that block and murders happened on this street. And he was serious. And I was like, Billy, I remember I said, first of all, we don't know whether 50 people are going to read this or 500 or 5,000, who knows? Number one. And I said, and number two, it's too early to worry about that stuff. I'd rather have fun and let's try to make this. And I had actually talked him into doing a documentary. To further kind of, enhance the fact that this all really happened. And then that changed later, but we still might do that one day. But yeah, I can't remember the point of bringing Billy up, what we were talking about, but yeah, he, I just remember telling him before it came out, I said, because he said, are you nervous about it? And I said, you know what? I haven't been nervous about it at all. I haven't really thought what the reception will be like until now, right before it came out. And I said, it is such a small, old-fashioned, I kept calling it my hometown campfire story, because it was kind of, I could really draw a parallel to the kind of stories I used to tell my friends when we were young to kind of scare them. About the hook man, or the boogeyman, or in the rubber band man, which I talk about in the book. It didn't exactly break any new boundaries as far as, theme or plot. It was kind of like Halloween, the movie, and a really personal. So yeah, there was some nerves right at the very end before it was coming out, because I'm thinking, who is going to care about this Edgewood guy's story? And I knew that it's not structured like a real novel, like a normal novel. There's all this information in the front, but that's because it was written as a true crime book. And I didn't want to change that when it sold. I had the opportunity to kind of spread some of it out. And I was like, no, I modeled it after a true crime book. And I'm kind of betting that it can find an audience despite its, unorthodox structure. And yeah, I got dinged by some people on Amazon, whenever they ran the ads, you'd see, like, I read them out loud to my family because I enjoyed them. You get like 3 of them saying, he invented a new genre. This is my favorite book of the year. This is my favorite book of the last 5 years. I couldn't finish it. This book is lame. I got to the end and I read the afterword and I felt cheated. Who cares about this guy's hometown? And he spent 20 pages writing about it. So it kind of put a spotlight on how readers are just, they're everywhere. So you know what? Write for yourself, because you're never going to, if you're writing to make them happy, it's never going to happen.
I agree. I got a question, and Brennan, follow up with it, my question if you want. But before the question, this type of book, for me, not every book works best at the beach. I don't feel relaxed, but with this one, man, I brought it, go to the Cape with my family every summer, and that's what we did. We went to the beach. I read your book and I loved it. I'm pretty sure I told you. And another thing that I loved about it, and I know that it mimics true crime books, is that you had pictures in there, and kind of bouncing around here, but going to your Facebook videos where 31 videos for every day in October, everything is just like, even as we're saying it's fake, it kind of still feels real, right, more real than other books. So my question is being someone that has really no knowledge of how your family works, what did your wife think of not only the book itself, but the fact that, like, she's in it, and I assume based on real interactions between you and her in college to your young adulthood, how'd she feel about all that?
She was the only one who, like, I had to get permission slips, or not permission slips. I sound like I'm in school, but permission release forms. So, like, all my friends had to sign them. Anyone who was in a photograph, anyone who I talked about extensively, because Simon & Schuster's legal department, they were up my butt, man. And so I covered all my bases and done a ton of interviews, and people have asked, how did your friends feel and all that? And you're like one of the first to ask about my wife, but I usually tried to mention the fact that out of all the people I mentioned in the book, and dozens who really exist in actual life, she was the only one who did not want to be included. She's like, less is more. And I remember when I turned it into Simon & Schuster, thinking, if I get a note back that says, if I get an editorial note that says, we need 20 more pages, involving your wife, I'm like, I'm in trouble. Because she was like, less is more. I don't need to be in there. She's again, I'm behind the scenes, and she's like really behind the scenes. So yeah, she loved the book, and she understood why she had to be in it, but less was more for her. And I kind of tiptoed the line and tried to like you said, I mean, the stuff that is in there is genuine and happened as closest to, until you got to the murders. And then, she was never worried about, prank callers and that kind of stuff. But yeah, where we went out to eat and we went to the mall and we did this, and she was an integral part of, she was there in the beginning of Cemetery Dance, and, she was in physical therapy schools. So she was busy and I was busy, and, doing our own things, but being together. So yeah, I mean, yeah, and I had to do that. That's just what I told her. I was like, if I'm going to put that stuff out there, it's got to be real and it's got to be honest. And I think that's why the book ultimately got such a positive reaction, is because there's a lot of heart and a lot of honesty in there. And, I've heard from a lot of people who have said, I've never read a serial killer novel with that much heart. And it always makes me laugh, because I'm like, yeah, you got a point. It usually doesn't. Serial killer novels aren't usually, love letters to the main character's family and hometown. So I'm like, I kind of got away with something there. But yeah, all my friends love it. They're like, I want, they all wanted more FaceTime. Trust me.
That's
Kara was like, just, as much of me as you can cut out, the better.
It's funny. And Brennan, please jump in after this. My wife's name is Tara. And you saying that, I laughed when you first said that, her initial reaction, because that'd be my wife's reaction, and pretty sure she'd be like, I don't want in it, something like that. So yeah, I get it. I totally get it.
Yeah, I enjoyed kind of yanking her chain on the days that I was actually writing about her, and kind of, rubbing my hands and go, yeah, I wrote a lot about you today. And she's like, I don't want to hear it. I don't want to hear it. I don't. And then she was anxious to read it when it was finished, but at the same time, she had, she was also very trepidatious, because she didn't want to read about herself. But yeah, I think I pulled off that part well enough regarding her to be past any trouble.
What you said about the heart, I think there's a lot to, what made the book work there. You were talking about how there were some readers who didn't want to read 20 pages of, kind of setting up the town, for lack of better words. But in any small town horror, serial killer or otherwise, like, the town's got to kind of live and breathe. And I thought it did such a nice job of pulling that off, but in a way that really fit in better with true crime than your typical coming of age, or even just weird small town novel. So as far as a follow-up question to one of Patrick's points a while ago, when you were talking about Billy kind of almost being like horrified at what people were going to think at first, right. It reminded me when, we talked to Todd Kiesling, who wrote Devil's Creek. He was not quiet about, the fact that he based that town off his hometown in Kentucky. So I'm curious, the people well and that had to sign release forms sound psyched about it, but what about the other people that are a little further more on the outside? Have you gotten any response that way?
I got a ton of response. And again, there were two things that were most kind of, and I should have expected it to some degree, or I should have at least been aware of it. Again, I'm like, man, I'm like a, flighty teenager, because I think I was just, the process was such an organic, rewarding, fun process for me, that I feel like I used the critics who didn't like it and the readers who didn't like it are going to be like nodding their head enthusiastically right now. But I was going to say, it's almost like I didn't use the majority of my brain to write this book. It just came out, and I did describe it that way. I said, there's some books that they're there fully formed and you're kind of just brushing dirt and debris away from them, because that's all you have to do. They're there. And in a lot of ways, that's how this book felt for me. It was fun to write. It was I wrote the book in like 3 months. My parents have been gone for 20 years almost. So while I wrote the book, they were here, and all my family, and friends were back in town. And I enjoyed that. I enjoyed sitting down at the keyboard every day. And, but yeah, I don't know. I've never had an experience like it before. And hopefully I'll have a similar experience with the next book, which I'm just starting. But yeah, I'm kind of terrified that I won't. But yeah, I just, I've never had that experience like that before, where it just kind of, rolled out. And the two surprises that I'm finally getting to here were, one was, and I should have expected it, but when I talked about, my growing up, all the experience, all the different things we did, throwing stuff at cars, having crabapple battles, snowball battles and popping tar bubbles, all those things. I didn't, and again, until the last minute think, I wonder if anyone's going to even relate to that. But I should have known better, because I heard from people all over the country, and actually, from overseas too, who were like, oh my God, we had the same childhood. And people who reveled in that and have held on to those memories, but also a lot of people who had kind of forgotten. And I have countless emails from people who I probably have a half a dozen who say, I forgot all about popping hot tar bubbles in the road until I read that in your book. And I forgot all about jumping ramps on my bike until I read your book. And that was really neat. And it was really rewarding to have these people and they were thanking me. They're like, thank you for reminding me. So that was neat. And then the other thing is that you asked about is the hometown. The response was overwhelming. And I think, I described the town honestly. It's a much rougher place right now than back in the 80s, and still in the 80s. And I talk about it in the book. I dated girls whose parents didn't want them to go back to Edgewood because it was, it was the tougher side of the tracks when it came to Hartford County, where I grew up. So the response from now, not only from the people I know and grew up with, but from everybody in Edgewood, has been, wonderful. And a lot of people have said that in a lot of ways, the book is a love letter to Edgewood too, which I am so happy with, because like I said, it'll always be my hometown. But we did a local signing actually at a new restaurant. The owner reached out to me and he really wanted to do this. And I was like, okay, I wasn't doing a lot of in-person stuff because of COVID, but we did this, and like 250 people showed up. And there were lines out in the parking lot. And I knew maybe 20% of them, but the other 80% were all Edgewood people who had come together to kind of celebrate this book. And it was neat. I've had some really fun signings, but I've never had anything like that where I signed for 3.5 hours straight. And there were people out in the parking lot, and everyone had a different story about Edgewood. So that was cool. And the fact that they all really enjoyed it was kind of icing on top.
That is so cool. Yeah.
And I didn't expect that. I didn't expect it. The only person who was mad was when I did those videos, which you guys were talking about, and I walked up the Myers house driveway.
I knew it'd be that one.
Yeah, and somebody lives up on the side there, like the granddaughter of the owner of the house now or something, and evidently like her car got vandalized like a week later, and she's like, I know it's because of all this boogeyman stuff, and but then there's like 20 posts on Facebook. Evidently she has quite a colorful personal life, and I got all these private messages from people I don't know. Don't even worry about it. We all know who did it. Her ex-boyfriend, he's a da-da-da. And I'm just like, oh my God. So yeah, that was the only person who wasn't happy, but everyone else was. And the local library did this beautiful display window, and the principal of Edgewood High School has a signed copy displayed in his office. People,
that's so cool, man.
So yeah, it's that's a neat feeling, because like I said, I love Edgewood. It's my roots, and I live 20 minutes away now, and anything, it's my soft spot. Anything somebody from Edgewood asks me, I'm pretty much going to say yes, because because growing up there was it's where my parents put down their roots and raised the family. So I'll always feel like I'm indebted to the place.
You could feel
that's really cool.
You could really.
I was just gonna throw out, man, like that's about the nicest thing I've heard all day, just to hear that the town rally behind it. I wasn't expecting some big mob of people with torches, but
Right.
To hear that you got this unanimously positive response, man, that just feels good.
Well, and it's crazy because it's there's girls dying in this book, and and everyone kind of has to catch themselves, because they're like, oh, I love the book. You talked about the town. You reminded me of, getting ice cream cones here and doing this. And I loved every word of it. And then they kind of stop and they go, well, only because the girls never really got killed. That part was made up. And I'm like, yes, I feel the same way when I say I have so much fun writing this book. And then I'm like, oh, 4 girls were killed and somebody else was attacked. And, but yeah, it's a weird book. I mean, any way you look at it, it's like, yeah, serial killer books probably shouldn't be, filled with love for your family and friends and that sense of longing and nostalgia for the past and all that. But it's just the way it worked out.
My one of my favorite scenes in the entire book was when a young you and your father were looking down at the town and it's snowing out. And man, like I grew up in a small town in similar to Brennan in Massachusetts. And in the 90s, it was just it's not bad now, but it was more, there was plenty more woods, I'll put it that way. Like we could run around and you wouldn't hit a street for a while. But now, before my folks moved out of there this past year, me and my wife were walking and I'm like, hey, that wasn't there. And I just caught myself really thinking about it. And you're kind of making me think of how I revisited my old childhood, my old stomping grounds. And then we walked to the soccer field, and next to it is a playground, and it's literally flattened. It's there's a like a 6 foot high gate surrounding the entire area. And I'm like, I'm glad I don't live near here anymore because this is depressing. But that kind of links up to the part of remembering. All three of us are writers. We probably put ourselves in our past in more ways than we realize in every story. I'm curious, Rich, do you think that people that actively read and actively write creatively have a a better connection to a childlike mentality? And what I mean by that is you don't grow up, audio listeners, I'm doing air quotes, you don't grow up meaning you're not having fun. That's what I think about when people say grow up. It means just do boring stuff and don't have fun.
Well, no, I'm with you because I'm just, yeah, I always refer to them as the grown-ups. And my kids know that, and my kids' friends who grew up with me know that I'm not a normal dad, and that Kara's not a normal mom. We're young at heart and still mischievous and adventuresome. And yeah, I mean, I'm, trust me, I've been accused of being a big kid my whole life, and I still am in the doghouse as much as my sons, if not more, for doing, ridiculous things. But yeah, I mean, I think there's a lot of writers like that. The thing, and I was talking about this earlier today. The thing that I think that always really marks someone as, you could be a writer, or do you journal because I have a feeling, is we're the ones who remember. And like there's a group of Edgewood guys who I've reconnected with because of this book. Guys I played lacrosse with back in the day, and a couple of them I played lacrosse with in college, but hadn't seen them in 20 years. And they kind of came out of the woodwork. They all came to the signings, and I'm in a big text thread with them now. There's about a dozen of us. And there's one guy, and I just talked about this to a friend earlier today. I'm like, this guy, Steve, he would have been, he's the writer in that group because he's the one who remembers all these things. And that's always been me. I always remember the details of our childhood, and I kind of referenced it in Boogeyman with my buddy Jimmy Cavanaugh in that scene where we're sitting in the car and he's kind of forgotten about the Myers house, even though it held so many precious memories when we were younger. And I kind of expressed that sense of disappointment and disbelief that, hey, how could you forget that? I've never forgotten it for a second. So yeah, I think it's, and I think in some ways that goes hand in hand with being, childlike, or again, being young at heart, because I think it's like the beginning of Boy's Life, the McCammon book, which is one of my favorites. And there's that kind of bit of poetry in the beginning where he talks about how, grownups, they have it educated out of them, spanked out of them, churched out of them, and it's the people who can kind of hold on to the whirlwinds and the fireflies that remain young at heart. And that's, I think a lot of writers are like that. I think sometimes it's because they remember, you don't forget what it was like and what it felt like. And yeah, and in some ways that's what Boogeyman ended up being about too, is the, kind of being able to go back into that well of all those memories.
Yeah. And with, you didn't mention the word nostalgia, but it's like, it's just floating in the air, just waiting to be mentioned. And with nostalgia, like I always felt like it was not necessarily a longing for specific, let's say, music or specific this or that, but it's more just things we associate with when we were kids and that kind of innocence and freedom. And it seems to me like, writers have almost a duty to capture that, that fiction writers, your job is to help people kind of find that escape. And if you can channel that, feeling of innocence and that feeling of getting out of school at 3 o'clock and not having a damn thing to do until somebody chased you down when the sun went down,
Right.
like that's what it is. And Boogeyman absolutely grabs onto that.
And it's interesting because some readers, don't want that sense of nostalgia. When you connect with a reader who embraces that and appreciates that, man, because you can tell just by me hearing what you just talked about. But there are some people who, the last thing in the world they want to remember is what it felt like to be all sweaty and rolling around in the grass and being itchy and chasing fireflies in the side. And some of them are because they never had positive attachments to those memories. And some of them, sadly enough, never had those memories at all, which I understand, but to me, that connection, I always say it's like stepping into a time machine and you go back, and it's like, for me personally, it's like I almost, you have to kind of catch your breath because the feeling is so strong. And it's like, I've been fortunate in my life and I've experienced some amazing moments. But I'll tell you what, I would trade a handful of them to go back and to walk into my local drugstore and walk out with 4 packs of baseball cards and open those baseball cards in 1976, because that feeling, when you have this, it's like that old kind of cliche. You never realize that last time when you and your friends all meet outside and play for the last time. It's just gone before you know it. You look back and you're like, man, that was 2 years ago. And then it's 20 and 30 years ago. So yeah, it's guys and girls like that who hold tight to those memories and those feelings that I think if you're able to connect with them, man, you've got a reader for life. And again, the cool thing for me at least is, I've never tried to do that. I've never been, again, I'm not being self-effacing. I'm being honest. I've never been kind of like clever enough to try to, mold a piece of fiction like that. I kind of just sit down and let it come out. And it's present in a lot of my work, and sometimes too much. I do know that I can be overly sentimental and I pull back on things on purpose from times because I want to, I want to be as honest to the reader as I can. But yeah, I mean, that's what I love about you guys. You guys get that, you read Ronald Kelly, McCammon, and some of Stephen King's, best stuff is stuff where he's kind of making that connection to the past.
Yeah.
It felt I was just gonna say
go ahead.
Dancing with her words. I was gonna say it felt like a Stephen King book, strictly in the sense where he separated himself in a lot of ways when he started, but one of them was that he just talked about small town America and the details about it. And the details are very important with that because unlike a big city, small town America is full of the important things, which is the people, which is the places you go to and so forth. And that's what you capture. That's why for me, it's a beach book, and it will be a beach book again in the near future. Brennan, sorry for rudely interrupting, sir.
No, it's going to keep happening apparently, but no worries. So, what hit me about all that is, you mentioned the crabapple fights, and that one stuck with me because, I still remember the crabapple tree behind my, grade 1 through 5 school, and just spending time whipping them at each other. And it takes, certainly your reader needs to kind of have that connection. But, if we think of that on a very like surface level, like a bunch of kids chucking these hard objects at each other, going home bruised and sore and potentially bleeding. And as a writer, it's your job to somehow turn that into a desirable event. And that's exactly what the best take horror out of it, the best literature that kind of revisits and latches onto that nostalgia can do. It's a fucking talent. Like there's no bones about it.
Yeah, I mean, again, people are either going to get that or not, because I can sit here as a fully grown adult and say there's nothing quite like plunking one of your best friends in the world, and he's not wearing a shirt, he's got his back turned to you, there is no honor in crabapple battles, taking that 5-foot running start and just cranking him right in the square of his back with a crabapple. He's grabbing at the bottom of his back with both hands and he's writhing around, and if he drops on the ground, you're going to pluck him again, so yeah, that's just part of being a kid. And again, I mean, unfortunately or fortunately, if I had a crabapple tree here in my yard and my friends were here as 50-something-year-olds, we would still do that. And again, I'm fortunate that the guys I've grown up with, I'm still close with a bunch of them, and I still see a bunch of them on a regular basis. So yeah, we're those kind of idiots that, you know, other grownups drive by and they're like, why are they wrestling in the dirt? And it's because somebody, you know, nailed someone with a dirt clog. But yeah, I mean, you guys got what I intended in the book, and you know, you mentioned the walking, you know, seeing the Christmas lights and the snow and stuff with my father. And it's like that scene and the scene where I'm sledding and I'm walking home by myself because all my friends have gone in, and I see my house in the distance, and I kind of have that revelation, that moment where I realized that, you know, nothing's ever going to be the same again. And all growing up, and people are going to leave, and people are even going to die. And it's just like, you know, it's that loss of innocence in a very organic way, you know, not because there's a killer in town, but just because this is how life works. You know, you grow up and you go your separate ways, and people leave, and all that. And I had that moment, and I've always said I've never written about it before. I've never really told people about it before. But I put it in here. And again, it was kind of a sense of trying to be as honest as I could, because I felt like I owed that to the story. And it struck me. It was like right away, it was like, that was the deer in Stand By Me, you know, when Stephen King, where he says, you know, he saw the deer and he's like, I've never spoken of it or written of it until now. And it's like, I think we all have those stories that are all ours until we let them go. And it was the same thing with my dad looking at the Christmas lights. You know, my sisters read that and they're like, that really happened. I'm like, yeah, you know. So yeah, it's for those reasons, and it'll always be a really special book to me. And again, I'm just, you know, you asked me what I expected or how it's been. And it's like, yeah, if you would have told me that it would have gone through 4 printings and been on the New York Times bestseller list and all that, I would have laughed and I would have said, you're insane. And, you know, no expectations of that. I mean, Simon & Schuster did a great job. I worked my ass off personally promoting it because it was a Simon & Schuster book. And I felt like for the first time in a long time, I felt like, you know, they paid me a nice chunk of money and they really believed in the book. And I know it's a weird book, so I'm going to work really hard to reward that trust. And I did, you know, and it all worked out. So again, I've always said I'm a lucky SOB, but after the experience with this book, I'm doubly so.
Yeah. Plus it had, I know a few good words, and 2 of them were Stephen King and someone that he considers one of the best in the crime business, Don Winslow. So even though you're friends with King, how's it feel to hear him say those nice things? And from hearing Don, what the guy's internationally a bestseller in the crime genre.
Don is such a cool guy, and I don't know him really well. I don't know him really well. I him and Harlan Coben came out and said something really nice, and again, I mean, I asked Harlan early on, hey, you know, Mr. Coben, you think you can have time to read this? And he was like, I'll do my best, and I didn't think he would, but I sent it up and I never bugged him again because it's just not my thing. But to have him tweet that out was nice. And Steve, you know, Steve tells me the truth. That's the good thing of you know,
he's a real friend.
Yeah. So when he said he liked it and he talked about what he liked, and, you know, one of the best things he said about that book, which was never used in a blurb or anything, was he just said, you know, when he read that interview at the end, he was alone in the house with Molly. And he said it just, you know, it freaked him out so much he had to stop reading, and he read the rest the next morning in the daylight. And I was like, okay, I thought that interview was creepy as hell if you really kind of read between the lines of what wasn't said. And I'm like, but to hear you say that meant the world. And you know what, he had some constructive criticism and a couple spots where the book really benefited, because I kind of thought, he's one time where he's like, and I think you should add this line at the end of this. And I wasn't sure at first. And then the more I thought about it, I'm like, son of a bitch, he's right. So I actually, you know, added back the line back in. And one of the first reviews talked about that line. And I'm like, well, no wonder. So yeah, no, all that feels wonderful. I mean, you know, Carolyn Kepnes and all the other people Linwood Barclay, who were kind enough, because that's not fun. You know, you guys know that it's not fun to send out a book and say, hey, if you guys don't mind, you know. But again, it was a Simon & Schuster thing where I was kind of just like, there was that moment of kind of celebration and satisfaction where it's like, wow, they really like the book. They really get it. They don't want to change everything. And they actually paid me, a really nice bunch of money, and they're going to promote it. And then you're like, oh God, I better step up and do my part. So, getting the blurbs and doing book plates and kind of just really hustling. I really enjoyed it. It reminded me of how I built my business, 30 years ago. Just kind of trying to cover every little nook and cranny. And, nothing was too small. And I always use the analogy, you guys have probably seen me do it, of selling glasses of lemonade. And I was like, you know what? Every book's a cup of one of those damn wax cups of lemonade I'm selling. So I'm like, I'm going to hustle and sell every one I can. And, but yeah, I never thought it would, open up at 10 on the New York Times and all that. That was ridiculous. And again, I must have been really a good guy in a previous life, because, that was cool.
It's well deserved, and you're a good guy now, you silly bastard. So, I forgot to mention earlier when we were talking about you and your goofball friends and fart joke. There we go.
Oh, here we go.
no, that's.
I didn't talk about farts in the book, did I?
No.
Yeah,
now you gotta write a sequel.
Author's preferred edition.
I'm going to write a sequel.
Oh shit! Really?
Yeah. That's actually the book that I say I'm about to start, but I've already started it. I've just been. I haven't done anything chronologically yet, but I've got a chunk down on paper, and yeah, I signed a 2-book deal with Simon & Schuster about a month ago.
Congrats, man.
Right before the holidays. Thank you. And the first one is going to be a direct sequel, which people are like, well, how can it be a direct sequel? Because he's in jail. And I'm like, Hannibal Lecter was in jail too, so be quiet.
Ted Bundy was in jail, and he helped find the Green River Killer. So
yeah, exactly. So yeah, so yeah, and I wasn't going to do it, but one day I was out riding the lawnmower, and because a lot of people ask me, and I'm like, no, and I'm like, that's all I want to do is write another book where I'm a character in it. And I actually, once I sold this, I promised both my agent and my editor, I'm like, I will never try to sell you a book with me as a character again. 2 is enough. But anyway, I was mowing the lawn, and what came to me was the perfect ending to chapter 1. And I thought, because I had that, I'm like, oh, it's really good. It's really smart. And I never feel that way about anything I'm doing. And I'm like, so I got to write it. So yeah, so that's kind of where that came about. And I put together an outline for it. And my agent, Kristen Nilsson, who's wonderful, she was able to convince them to do it again with me. And so, yeah, that'll be the next thing that I'm writing. And I'm excited, I get to, it's not Edgewood 1988. It's Edgewood, 2024, I think, in the book. So, but bad things are still happening. And once again, I'm kind of torn by that whole fascination with the dark stuff that happens, and trying to be, a family guy. And so, it's another adventure where people are going to kind of shake their head and say, this Chizmar guy's not too bright, but he's fun to follow around for 300 pages.
That interview was creepy. Brennan, jump in afterwards, unless you want to talk more about this with Gwendy.
Jump in afterwards? After what? Are you going to ask a question, or?
Yeah. So sorry, Rich. We've been off for about 2 months.
No,
This is peak form. This is
this is at our
season form, man.
This is at our best. So I want to talk about promotion, because you can never have enough authors that are fortunate enough in like your position to kind of give a little tip here or there for promotion, even at that level, to newer writers or writers that are currently but just on the indie scene. So I was wondering if there's any tips that you may have for that.
The biggest tip I could give would be, go back a year in my Facebook and Twitter and just look at all the stuff that I did. I was like, I was the kid who used to kind of throw, like carnivals. And I think I talked about this in the book maybe, but I would throw like carnivals in my side yard and get rid of my old toys as prizes. And I would, I would have a magic show in my in the breezeway of my house, and my friends will still tell you they loved it. They're like, you were the worst damn magician I've ever seen in my life. And I'm like, yeah, but you paid a nickel a piece to come in and watch, didn't you? And then the whole lemonade stand thing. There's always been that kind of entrepreneur in me, and I enjoy that part of kind of just, taking something and seeing, how many people I can kind of pull in. And I really did kind of go back to that. Like I said, nothing was too small. The book plate idea was, again, lots of authors have done it. But it snowballed. I mean, I ended up doing a total of 10,000 book plates. And the largest order I ever placed was 2,000. I mean, I remember in the beginning I did 1,000, then I was like, oh, I need 1,000 more. And I think I did that up to about 5. And then I was like, well, maybe I better get 2,000. And then, so I nickeled and dimed my way to, and those were, I have about 500 left. So, 9,500 of those suckers are, some of them I'm sure went right to trash cans because I sent them to a lot of stores. But, that was one aspect. I put some money into Amazon advertising, which some people would be like, how could you do that? But I kind of wanted to cover every basis. And I gave plenty of free stuff to independent stores, and I reached out and, but I didn't ignore, BAM and Barnes and Noble were really good to me.
Nice.
I tried to, cover every base that I could think of. And I had some benefits because of the publishing company. I was able to say, hey, for the next week, whoever pre-orders a book and sends it to me, I'm going to, have my office send you a free copy of blank, and most writers don't have that freedom.
Yeah.
But what I told people is I said, chapbooks, you can get a chapbook locally produced and you can do it fairly inexpensively. And people like to get something for free. They like to get a bonus.
Damn, that's a great idea. Seriously, I've never heard. We've talked to a bunch of people. Over 100, I think. It's well over 100. Seriously, over 150 maybe now. No one's ever said that piece of advice. That's great.
Trust me. I mean, if you guys printed up 100 and the thing is nowadays you can do them with a really nice copier, and you can saddle stitch them yourself. If you said, hey, the next 100 people who pre-ordered this book and send me confirmation of their pre-order, I'll send you this. It's going to cost you $1 a piece postage, so it's going to cost you some money, but it's a drop in the bucket, compared to going to a big magazine or a big publication and pulling and doing a 1/6 of a page display ad or something. The Amazon advertising was successful for us. So that was my big thing. I just tried to cover every little nook and cranny. And when the books came out, I drove around to a bunch of bookstores and I signed their stock. And I, felt like an idiot in many cases, but then I would tweet and say, hey, there's signed copies of so-and-so. And inevitably they'd be gone in a day or two. So yeah, I just, I kind of hustled and enjoyed it. And, that when I built the business, I remember I used to spend a lot of time reminding myself, hey, just keep doing what you're doing, because other people aren't stubborn, hard-headed, hardworking, or dumb enough to do this. And if you can stay on this track, you're going to outlast a lot of them. And that's what happened. So it's the same thing with trying to promote a book is I kind of went back to that mindset and said, just put in the hours. It's not rocket science. Just put in the hours and try to spread the word. And fortunately, social media, the people who I'm associated with, my friends on these social networks are amazing. I've in 10 years, I've had to block like 5 people for being an idiot. And just, I feel like I have this wonderful street team, army of people who are willing to go to stores and deliver stuff for me and actually thank me for letting them help me, which I am always like, no. No, I'm thanking you because you're doing me a favor. And I got a thank you email from someone today who dropped off Gwendy book plates at a store and thanked me. And I was just like, no, thank you. I said, that is, you don't understand how big of a help that is, because some stores are very receptive to receiving them directly, and others, you kind of have to put them in front of their nose and say, hey, look, these are really professionally done and they're nice and it's a real signature. Yeah. And you'll actually look like a bookseller who cares by slapping them in the book. So yeah, that's my biggest advice is just, treat it as you're selling cups of lemonade on the corner.
Before we go to Gwendy, actually, you brought up something, talked about perseverance, in paraphrasing your words, be the dumb guy that kind of sticks it out. because a lot of people will fall by the wayside. My words, not Rich's, but I want to stick with that because the last 3 years I've really been focusing a lot more than before that. I was on like Twitter for, I don't know, 6-7 years, and I never really focused too much on that until I really dove into the independent side of the horror, crime, whatever community. And there's a section where it's very toxic, and it seems like a lot of complaints. And I'm bringing this up because I always wonder, I'm like, it just kind of sounds like you're here to complain, and you're not happy because you're complaining about the thing that I'm happy about, writing books and reading books and talking to like-minded folks, the things that my friends are happy about. So I'm curious, with the time you spent publishing, have you noticed trends like that where and it doesn't have to be a specific example, like where there's people that complain just to complain about something. It happens to be that they're a writer. Because you got guys like Ronald Kelly, like we talked about, Brian Keene, Robert McCammon, like those dudes clearly love to write and they do it well. And they stick by it. I'm just wondering, there had to be a bunch of other people that started when they started or before, but they're not around. No one talks about them.
Gosh, yeah. No, I mean, coming up in the 80s and 90s and all those small press magazines that existed back then, that were actual magazines because there was no online back then. Yes, you really got to see who was up and coming and who was in every other magazine. And Ronald Kelly was one of them. And so was Joe Lansdale and Bentley Little and Brian Keene eventually and the others. And then you would see others disappear. But yeah, to go back to the complaining part, people, man, it's become more prevalent. And again, I'm not going to get into a political discussion, but it's become more prevalent in the last, 5, 6, 7 years that there's a lot of people who are unhappy and are just going to go out of their way to complain, and they're going to go out of their way to be toxic and confrontational and all that. I mean, there's always been people like that right from the very beginning of our business. I always tell you, look, as a publisher, you only get that first year to 2 years where you're the new guy on the block. And even though you are filled with imperfection in your productions and all that, you still are kind of the apple in everyone's eye because you're the new kid on the block. And they usually give the new guy the benefit of the doubt. And then all of a sudden you become more successful, and you're going to get those people who are like, well, they're getting too big for their pants, full color covers, they're going to go out of business in 6 months. You watch. And 3 months later, they're like actively rooting for you to go out of business. So yeah, we've seen it all. And then after that, you get a second wave, and then and I've seen it happen with other publishers. And the thing is there's always some element of truth to it. It's like I always tell people, I'm like, hey, anyone who I don't listen to the complaints, but I also don't listen to all the praise. I appreciate it. We're always trying to get better. And if you can honestly feel that way, and you honestly know you're out there busting your ass and doing the best you can, then you know what, you're able to kind of legitimately step back and say, hey, I'm trying to get better every day. I'm listening to the constructive, polite criticism, and the rest of it I just wash away and I don't listen to. And I've always been able to do that. And it's something that, Brian Freeman, who just kind of after 20 years is staking out on his own. And we've had this talk a lot. Brian had to learn to kind of grow that thicker skin, because he came to CD right out of college, and he was a fresh-faced kid, and eventually, Brian got to the same point where it's like there's that fine line between being a professional and addressing people's complaints, and then realizing that no matter what you say or do, you're not going to make this person happy. So therefore, the thing you have to do is just ignore them and go on your way. And that's been a big key to our success, even from the very beginning. Is I never listened too closely to the praise. I never listened too closely to the criticism. I always followed my own vision and my own path. And with the magazine and the book publishing company, I actually did have a vision of how I wanted things to progress, and have been pretty fortunate that that's happened. So yeah, I mean, Twitter and all that, I hear all the time about people having drama and all that. And I've just always stayed away. If someone, if someone is going to get real vocal and it's really easy to hit the block button. And for me, it's always been easy to ignore because I'm just like, dude, I've been doing this 30 years. Trust me, anything you have to say has been said before. Didn't bother me then. It's not going to bother me now. I'm going to work tomorrow as usual. And guess what? If you're not happy, somebody else will listen to you because it's not going to be me. I've always been stubborn and very focused in that way. I don't have time for it. And, and I've always told people, I'm like, I can be a very cocky guy on like the basketball court or something. I grew up as an athlete. So, and the only time it ever crosses over into that, business kind of a sense is, I always have had this feeling, and you should too with your show and your writing, both of you. And it's just, don't ever bet against me because you'll lose. Because I will work my ass off 24/7 to ensure that you lose. And I'm stubborn and I'm hard-headed. And I've got that Edgewood work ethic that I learned from my dad and all the other kids' dads in the neighborhood. So you won't win. So that's the only time I've never once said, you are going to love this story I wrote. You are going to love this book. I hear writers do that all the time, and it sends a chill down my spine because I'm like, how can they do that? Because I know that no matter how much I love this story, 30% of the people out there, if I'm lucky, are going to disagree and say, that's a piece of shit.
Yeah.
I've learned that after 30 years. So I've never done that. I've never, even on a book I've edited, I've never said, you are going to love this collection because I know. But again, it's the one time where, they might be, man, that Chizmar guy's cocky, because I'll look anybody straight in the eye and I'll say, hey, go ahead, bet against me. You'll lose. I guarantee it.
That's the Larry Bird attitude I like, sir. But in all seriousness, no, I am. You can ask Brennan. I am like that with the show. I won't name specifics, but I think we're a phenomenal product because I had to cool it off. Well, I won't get into the details of that either, but I had to take a step back because not Kara, but Rhymes said, yeah, you gotta chill out with that, which made sense. But yeah, I want to improve. I like compliments too, but like it's like a beta reader. I've learned to rely on two pretty much heavily. Mm-hmm. Brennan's one of them because the moment I get beta notes back that are just trying to pat me on the back, I'm not going to you ever again. As far as the show goes, I want to give reasons, and I'm super vocal about this. I want to give reasons for people like you or Peter Straub. Like, we still want newer writers, but I want to talk to the authors I grew up loving, man. R.L. Stein probably will never happen, but I don't give a fuck. I'll try.
Yeah. And you don't know. I mean, I felt the same way back in the day. I hope to publish Stephen King in the magazine one day. Probably never happened. You just don't know. And that's the thing. I mean, you make it your own. You have your own vision. I remember some reviews that were like, cemetery, and this is way back, issue 6, issue 4, issue 15, they were able to publish Joe Lansdale and Ramsey Campbell and Andrew Vax, but obviously, they were trunk stories, and that's how he got them because, and I just remember thinking, that's the only reason Chizmar took them is because, they were big names. And I remember thinking, well, you're actually insulting me twice here because one, you're insulting my integrity as an editor. Yep. To actually like claim that I'm buying crappy stories just because the name that's on them. And number two, you're insulting my talent as an editor because I really love those stories. That's why I bought them, dude. So again, and it would just make me, and that's what, I've won a bunch of World Fantasy Awards and all these other awards, and I've never gone and accepted any. And I have no problem with people who love awards and would go would spend money to go to every convention to accept it, or if they were nominated. And I just never did that because it never really mattered to me, and people will say, well, it's in your bio. And I'll say, that's exactly what it's worth. It's in my bio. and if I win one next year, it'll go on my website and it'll probably be added to my bio. And that's it. I don't care because after 30 years, I know there's been times when I've been nominated for something, like a Best of Cemetery Dance, where I'm like, well, you know what? Yeah, that probably was the best anthology that year because it took stories from a 10-year period. So how could it not be good? But it got beat out by something else. And then there's years I've won for something. And I'm like, how the hell did that win? We put that together in 2 weeks with 6 phone calls. And so it's just, those things have never mattered to me. It's always just been about the personal vision and what I wanted to do. And that's, you guys have you guys, the podcast has a personality, and
Thank you.
it's a very positive. It's a person for me. It's very positive and it's very uplifting, but without being fluff. And to me, that's not easy to do. And I think it inspires a lot of people. I think you get, I remember the first time I came on, you were like, "Hey, you're different than I thought you'd be." Just, probably because you thought I was this old gray-haired guy who was going to be stiff. But it's like, you provide a comfortable, knowledgeable environment. So you're going to get people who trust you and talk to you. And again, don't change that. Just keep doing what you're doing and outlast everybody else. And I don't mean that in a competitive sense. I've never meant that. I've always I remember lots of people who were competitive, and I'm like, man, we're talking about Cemetery Dance at the peak of the magazine's success, like 30,000 copies out there or something. I'm like, so you're talking about a drop in the bucket. I'm like, guys, there's plenty for all of us. So I don't mean that, but that's just in a very black and white sense of, guess what? I'm going to put in the hours, and I know lots of other people won't. And even if I make no money for 10 years, which I didn't in the beginning of Cemetery Dance, I'm still going to be there, even if I have to work 2 other jobs to make it happen. So it's just, and at the time I didn't have a mortgage and I didn't have kids. So I was in an enviable position in that regard. So yeah, it really does. I try to teach my own boys that it's like, there are some secrets that you kind of spend your whole life looking for. This isn't one of them. Hard work is, I learned that really early. Hard work does work. There are going to be times when you have successes and you kind of feel bad because you're like, well, I know so-and-so works their butt off and they haven't had that success. And I'm like, that's just part of life. I said, you're like with sports, same thing. You're going to find yourself on both ends of that at times, but just do the work and be hard-headed and stick around, and good things will happen. It almost always does.
Definitely appreciate that. Seriously though, like that. Thank you, Brent. I promise jump in after this. Thank you for that, man. We both admire what you do and you as a person. So that means a lot. And unless Brennan wants to end the friendship, which it can't happen at this point. I plan on doing
too much dirt on me.
Yeah. we are not stopping for we're not stopping for a
yeah. I mean, even if life throws you some stuff, man. When I had cancer and I was 30, just like I talked about in Boogeyman, I didn't publish for 10 months because I was literally trying to stay alive. I was doing chemo and I lost 50 pounds and blah, blah, blah. But it was never far from my thoughts. And that was the worst thing about chemo. I remember telling people is once I was so sick that I couldn't read because I couldn't focus on the page. And then,
wow.
Once I could read again, I felt so much better and so much more like myself, even though I didn't have any hair on my head and all that. But I was I remember David Silva from the horror show said he was shocked at how quickly I came back and how much I wanted to come back, because he felt like a lot of times when a person has that life altering situation, it doesn't happen. And I just remember it was like, well, for me, it was just further proof of this is what I want to do. I'm better now, so I'm going back to work. But yeah, don't feel bad if a situation arises where you got to take a break, even if it's a mental health break or it's a, hey, I got to work overtime at work because, whatever. Just, again, it's never neat. That's what I always tell people. It's rarely neat and pretty. So, but if you can kind of look up 10 years down the line and say, hey, I'm still here, that's a good feeling. So,
yeah. I did take the 2 months off for a mental break, and because I had to reevaluate what was actually important. And the podcast will remain because it's fun. I get to think about it. I don't know if we would have talked we wouldn't have you and me and Brennan wouldn't have talked like this without a podcast, and that's not good or a bad thing. It's just it's a good thing, but it has allowed us to understand and connect with authors, like-minded people, and we've gotten reception on the show itself in ways that is more than entertainment now. So I just kind of going back to, we're doing it because this is fun for us, and we're very hungry to write, and just keep on learning from people that we can learn from. Brennan, I'm blabbering a lot. Why don't you take over, buddy?
Man, I don't think I could hit every point on that on Rich's answer that I would want to without bringing us well over the 2-hour mark. So, I mean, I will say, Patrick, you're never going to get beta notes from me that are congratulatory. So,
Good.
I mean, just get used to that.
Good.
And, you know, pretty much everything you just said, Rich, it exemplifies this like blue collar work ethic that, you know, just bleeds into Chasing the Boogeyman. This hardworking, likable, you know, affirmation that, you know, just it makes the book work.
And being able
Patrick
to take the bumps, you know, and this again, I'm talking to my older son, and I remember I had a day where I was like, Billy, you're a lot like me. I'm like, you know, we're both kind of grinders. We don't usually do it the easiest way. We don't usually do it the prettiest way, but we do it. And I'm like, and, you know, and I was probably talking to an 18-year-old Billy at the time, but I was just like, I don't want you to ever undervalue that, because the amount of people who actually do it as opposed to think about it or talk about it is such a low percentage. And I'm just like, don't ever, because I remember he was building something and he's like, I probably spent, you know, $300 when I should have spent $100. And I'm like, but guess what? You did it. I'm like, most people wouldn't have even. And I said, you just described how I built my business. I probably spent a lot of 80-hour weeks in the beginning when it should have been a 40-hour week, but because of the way I did things, but guess what? I did it. And if I was trying, and he got this, it was like, you know, rarely do you get the 18-year-old light bulb to go off. I was just like, but think about it. If you had to do it perfectly to the directions, and you had to, you know, it had to be, you know, perfection. I said, you wouldn't have done it, or you would have given up. I said, but instead you did it your way, which ended up being the hard way. Spent a few extra bucks doing it, but at the end of the day, it was finished and you did it. And I just said, again, trust me, that is. And there was another time where we were doing a film and the production company, it was raining, it was miserable, and they wanted to put it off. And I was just like, you know, it's my money out here doing this. And I'm like, we can't put it off for, you know, till the weather's better, because it's not gonna be better for a week. And Billy's gonna be back in college, and we just got to suck it up and go and do this. And I'm not that kind of a boss. Everybody at Sundial will tell you, you know, it takes a lot to get me mad. Once I'm mad, I'm mad. But it takes a lot to get me there. And I wasn't angry, but I was very, you know, it was one of those times where, you know, I was just like, guess what? I know I'm the boss, and I'm going to be the boss. And I just remember it opened Billy's eyes a little bit to, yeah, sometimes you just have to power through, and it's going to be ugly and sloppy, and it's going to be miserable. But when it's done, it's done. And again, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but that's what I feel like, you know, you guys feel the same thing. It's just like, you know what? You guys have a secret that a lot of people don't have. And the cool thing about it is it's not even a secret. So it's just like, keep it in your pocket, share it with people who matter, and keep doing what you're doing.
Yeah. The only thing I was going to add on to the end was, you know, question for 5 minutes led to, you know, a really great discussion. And I'm glad we went there. This is shaping up to be the best episode of season 3 so far.
Yeah. One of one. Yeah, you guys are rolling.
And that's the end of season 3.
Adios. I want to take us to Gwendy's final task. It is out February 15th. Patrick, do you have any idea when this episode airs?
Yeah, next weweek, which would be the 30. Oh, damn. I forgot.
Monday is the 31st.
Thank you.
All right, you are welcome. So yeah, Gwendy's final task is out February 15th. Now, going back a little bit, and please correct me if I am misremembering, but book 1, Gwendy's button box, and right up there, I believe. I think that was a story that Steve started and just couldn't get the hang of, and he brought you in on it. So give us just the short version of how book 1 comes about.
Yeah, real short version is we were emailing back and forth about round robin projects and collaborations. And he mentioned he had the story he never was able to finish. And I said, you know, I'd love to read it sometime. And I was saying, I would just love to read it because I'm your friend. And it's one of the coolest things in the world that I get to read stuff early, like his new one, Fairy Tale. I read it like 4 months ago in manuscript. And
oh, you bastard.
I know. And that's one of the, that's one
great?
of the best.
Is it good?
It's amazing. I
can't wait.
It's what I've told people. I'm like, this is the kind of book that made me fall in love with reading.
I got chills when I saw your post. You're the post was the first saw, and I'm like, I need this.
Well, it made me want to go to the library, and I was like, I don't know that I felt that way about reading a book. Like, okay, I've read this, I've experienced it. Now I want to go to the library and just like be surrounded by books instead of my office, which is wall to wall books. But it was a neat experience. And,
Different books, man.
but that was my whole thing is I was just saying, you know, I know that I get that once in a while, and I don't ask like Fairy Tale. I knew nothing about this book. I thought his next book was a Holly Gibney book because that's what I had read about in public. I don't ask him. So that was a, you know, a nice surprise. So, but yeah, that element of the friendship is there, which I'm very fortunate, you know, I'm very grateful for. So yeah, I was just like, I'd love to read it sometime, and it showed up the next day, and his email said, it was very brief. It said, "Do with it as you wish." And I thought about that, and I thought about it in the context of what we were talking about. And I emailed him back. I said, "You want me to try to finish it?" And he said, "If you want to, if you think you can." And then, so I said, "All right, let me give it a look." And you know, that's how it happened. I mean, later that weekend, it was decided I'd take a crack at it, and you know, I spent the weekend in terror because I didn't tell my wife, I didn't tell my sons, I didn't tell anybody because it just didn't feel real. And I was like, I had to process it. And I remember Monday rolled around and I told her, or Sunday rather, and I told everybody. And then Monday I got to work, and yeah, I never dreamt that in a million years. Never thought it possible. So that was Button Box. That's how that came about.
So let me ask you a stupid question.
Sure.
Was it fun?
You know what? Yeah, it was ridiculously fun. I remember, and I've told this story a lot, so I'm sorry if you've heard it, but I had a yellow notepad and a pen, and I started jotting down some general thoughts, which I don't usually do, but I felt like, okay, this is a big deal. I got to do this right. And I remember I was so nervous, my hand was shaking. And I just put the pen down and I was like, this is ridiculous. And I just opened my laptop, and instead I just started writing. I literally read the last few pages of what he had sent me, which I had printed out, and I started writing, and it was like, boom, you know, within like half an hour, I was in Castle Rock. I was writing, you know, my own story, and was just, you know, flying along. And I think I wrote 10,000 words in the next 2 days. And again, I was like, I started getting nervous, like, and I was like, I can't go over this again and again with a fine tooth comb, or I'll never send it. I just have to hit send and send it to him. So that's, yeah, I mean, it was so much fun. And you know, each book it has just, you know, built on that. And this last one was the most fun I've ever had writing a book. You know, it was a full length novel. And we dealt in bigger chunks, and it was, you know, whereas the first one was a novella, it was like 25,000 words. And the second one I was on my own. But with this one, we were trading larger chunks of text and really not telling each other where we were going. And it just felt like this great, you know, it felt like, okay, I've died and gone to heaven. And I, you know, the first thing I have to do is this writing exercise where I'm trading sections of a Castle Rock, Derry, Maine story with my literary hero. So yeah, fun from start to finish. And, you know, I just did a Zoom with Steve 2 days ago for Simon & Schuster, sitting right here. And that's what I told him. I was like, Steve, when we started this book, I was terrified because of where you set part of the book, because I'm like, I knew nothing about this and I had to learn. And I'm like, but yeah, ended up being the most fun I've ever had.
That's, I really dig the idea that you've got 3 books in the trilogy, and not a one of them was kind of written in the same manner. I think that's really interesting. Now, one thing that struck me is in the introduction to Magic Feather, Steve wrote something along the lines of "Nobody writes small town like you." So I wonder, you know, obviously you're intimately familiar with his work. How was writing in places like Castle Rock and Derry? You know, how much freedom did you feel versus having to like be beholden to like research and rereading?
You know what? I felt a responsibility to getting it right because, you know, it's his universe. But I mean, a crazy story about the second book is I always thought he was going to come back and write the second book with me. You know, and I think we might have talked about this, but I just, you know, when he said, that's a great idea, you need to do this, I'm going to be busy with Holly Gibney. It was, you know, he's writing one of those books 2 years ago or whatever. I took that as, you know, hey, Rich, you write the first draft and I'll come and rewrite and add stuff on and make you look really great. And that was never his intention. He told me later. He's like, well, no, you wrote this book. It's your idea. It's great. His words. He's like, I'll edit it if you want, but it's your book. I never would have probably delved so deeply into Castle Rock's, the mythology of the town. I essentially brought the town back. I mean, Castle Rock was destroyed at the end of Needful Things, which happened after the first Button Box book. So there had been no Castle Rock, after Needful Things until I brought it back in that book, which I wouldn't have had the balls to do that if I didn't think Stephen King was going to write it with me. I brought the sheriff, I made the deputy the sheriff, and I put a statue that talked about the reconstruction of the town and all that. So that was pretty heady stuff to do, unless you kind of thought the big guy was there along for the ride with you. So that's whenever people are like, "Oh, Rich, are you trying to pull my leg?" I'm like, no, I never would have done all that. So, but yeah, it's a blast, and I feel responsibility to get it right. And that's where Bev Vincent comes in, because he knows Steve's world even better than Steve does. So he always read it and corrected, my mistakes. But yeah, but like in the third book, I'm the one who took us to Derry. I got my section to, he sent me that, next section, and it's just, that's where the story wanted to go. So I kind of, next, we're in Derry, Pennywise is mentioned, and I'm like crapping my pants over here. And then I have to send it to Steve, and I'm holding my breath because I don't know what he's going to think. But he loved it, and he made all the Derry stuff even better. So yeah, that was the fun thing about it, is it's just, we had complete freedom, and we stated that up front, and complete trust. And yeah, dream come true stuff, obviously.
Yeah, I would imagine that would toe a nice, neat line between being just absolutely breathtakingly fun and intimidating as hell. But that sounds great,
Same time, like roller coaster. Right?
Yeah.
It's like, this is exhilarating and wonderful, and I may die. And he told me in the beginning of Final Task, he's like, Rich, because I remember I asked a couple questions, and he answered me with non-answers. And at some point I could see him smiling over email, and I got an email. He says, Rich, strap in. I don't know where we're going. I never do. Let's just go. And I was like, okay. So it felt and I sent him a very corny, and I mentioned this in the Zoom, I sent him a very corny text one day when we were probably 200 pages into the manuscript. And I was like, Steve, this is, in my mind, this is what a collaboration should always be. And I'm like, we're not writing each other into corners, but there's complete freedom, complete trust. I said, and it feels almost like this challenge to each other without purposely trying to get each other in a corner, where it's just, okay, I just gave you my best for 40 or 50 pages. Now it's your turn. Where are you going to take us? And that's what it felt like. And in many, and I'm not enough of a writer to hold the guy's jock strap, but at the same time, while we were writing that book, I felt like I was matching him, and that's a cool feeling to have when the reality of it is that's not true. But by the time we were finished with the book, and we had blended everything, and I had rewritten him, which is a ridiculous concept, but true, and he had rewritten me, and we added stuff. And he said this in the Zoom, he's like, I look back and I don't know who wrote entire sections, and I'm like, I don't either, and that's ridiculous. So yeah, you talk about fun. This is the time of my life.
That's awesome to hear. And make that's going to make people want to read it all the more, is just the fact that I love when I pick up a book and I can tell that the author, in this case authors, just had the time of their lives, writing it, putting it together and planning it and all that, in as much planning, like you said, as actually went on.
yeah I think people will see that. I think people will see that we had a lot of fun.
Now, what I loved about Magic Feather is we met this character in Button Box, and you can't help but fall in love with her. It's just the way that thing is written. It's just, it reads like a fairy tale, and you just become attached to this character. And checking in on her when she's in DC, it just feels right. I can't think of a better word for it. So, I mean, are you happy with where you left Gwendy, revisiting her and where you're bringing her?
Yeah. I mean, again, I'm going to keep referring back to this Zoom, but only because it just happened, and it was really extensive and fun to do. And you know what? Again, because Steve and I, we spend more time talking about our dogs and movies than we do about our own work and what we're doing. So even with Gwendy, when we were done, we didn't talk about it too much, but it was nice to hear him say, he's like, this is the strongest book of the three. And it's because, you know, we had the time to put into it, and we really kind of were both operating at you know, optimal speed. And yeah, I mean, we're really happy with the way it ended. And you know, there's all kinds of possibilities. And, you know, everyone talks about, they see the Dark Tower in the background on the cover, on the two covers. And it's like, so there's obviously some connections, but they're not, you know, there's just, somebody finished it yesterday, the arc, and sent me a message on Facebook, and they, you know, they just talked about how many threads run through it that connect to other Stephen King stories and worlds. And I'm just like, that again, you talk about the privilege of being able to be involved in that. So it is my favorite book of all time. It kind of, the book It is responsible for me doing this. You know, I've told that story a lot, and it kind of saved me at a time I needed saving, and re-inspired me to get in this world. And, you know, 6 months later, I started Cemetery Dance. So again, if you would have told that guy, you know, that, guess, you know, one day you're going to be writing about the sidewalks of Derry and the canal, and a clown with silver eyes, and, you know, I would have laughed and you know, called you an idiot. So the fact that that happened is, again, I'm going to use the word, it's ridiculous, and I'm grateful for it. And I still, you know, I've got a couple copies of the advanced books up in my office, in my bedroom, and still every time I walk by it, I kind of have to touch it to make sure it's real. True story. So yeah, I'm still that kid who, you know, people are like, well, this book's going to be on the New York Times bestseller list. And I'm like, you know what? I hope it is, but I don't even care, because, you know, because I can touch it and it's real. And my name is right there next to Steve's. And that, you know, I have the 4 months of memories of writing that book together with him, you know, with me always. So yeah, just again, I can't even pretend to be cool about it, obviously. So
I love that it is longer than the first two, man, because the first two, as Brennan stated, are very different, but they're a hell of a lot of fun.
Thank you.
Yeah, man. So we're gonna start winding down here. I wanted to ask, I'll start with you, Rich. What are you currently reading?
You know what is the name of it? I think it's like The Hollows or something like that. It's Mark Edwards' book. Who I was not familiar with, but I read this jacket copy, and I'm like, I need a copy of this book. And he goes to, you guys got to look it up. I'm pretty sure it's called The Hollows. He goes to this camp in Maine with his 14-year-old daughter. That bad shit happened here, and he's kind of revisiting, you know, trying to write a new story. He's a journalist, so he's looking for a new story, and he finds it there. It's kind of a true crime aspect type of a thing, and I'm only about 40 pages in, but it's really good.
Yeah, The Hollows.
The Hollows, yeah, that's it.
Yep.
The three.
And then I'm going to read Demon Theory by an old one from Stephen Graham Jones that I had never read before. But I was going through a box of books and I found a hardcover, so I'm like, I need to read this.
I just found his second book at the Goodwill local to me, and
cool.
It's All the Beautiful Sinners. I didn't even know, I wasn't familiar with his earlier stuff, but it looks great.
He's been around for a while too.
Yeah, that came out in 2003.
Yeah.
So, Brandon, I'm gonna jump in. Speaking of Dawn, reading Don Winslow's City on Fire, and as a masshole that grew up, whether I liked it or not, I did. Hearing stories about Whitey Bulger and the Italian mob and the Irish mob, it's full of that world that I am very intrigued by.
Yeah, and Don's brilliant. Don doesn't have those happy accidents that I have, where it's like, hey, the idiot savant got lucky. Don's just a smart dude who is crazy talented and has been doing it for so long. So it's like everything in those books that you just talked about came right out of his brain, right through his hands into the computer.
Yeah, and I was watching this interview with him on, I forget what the news station was last year, and he said that he puts 16-hour work days in to write. I mean, man, I don't know about you before I had a kid, obviously, because it's not a thing when he's 1 or 2 or whatever. I don't know if you guys heard it, but just about 5 minutes ago, I heard, that's why whenever I took that off, I heard him going, "Rah, Dad!" But I would write up to 8 hours sometimes, and I wouldn't get more than a few thousand words. Which is weird because the days that I focus 2 to 3 hours, I can get close to it. But 16 hours, my brain would be mush.
Yeah, the last 8 hours would not be productive for me. So yeah, that wouldn't happen. I can do like the dirty work of like stuffing envelopes and all that kind of stuff for 20 hours straight. But yeah, if I'm trying to be creative and semi-intelligent, no, I'm gonna run out probably after 7 or 8.
I'm bouncing around with 3 other ebook, audiobook, and hard copy book. The hard copy is a collection of Peter Straub's poetry from 1970-75, I believe. It's a limited edition. It's called Leeson Park and Belsize Square. Came out in the 80s. I forget the publisher, but he's a poetic writer, and I wanted to read his poetry, and it's as smart as you would think it is.
I was going to say Peter's the smartest guy of every room in every room.
Yeah.
So, yeah, he's a different cat.
It's good poetry, but I know that I'm not smart enough to get it.
Yeah, you're just trying to
But
feel
you're trying.
absorb the words and imagery. I know, I hear you. I'm the same way. It's like, yeah, I mean, even some of Peter's prose can be that way. It's just like, whoa.
Yeah, I appreciate it. Like even with Coco, that became one of my favorite books as soon as I read it. I'm like, I gotta read this 5 more times to kind of like grasp everything. But believe it or not, I've never read or listened to 1984 by George Orwell. So I mean, it's all right there. It's terrifying how similar aspects are to technology nowadays. And the last book is Burner by Robert Ford, about 60% in that. For those that do not know Robert Ford, he's a phenomenal writer. And this one, I will not spoil it, but it goes from this is a cool story, and then once it hits this one part, and I talked to him about this a day or two ago, I could read it as you said you did with Steve, his smile and laughing through text, where it's like, all right, we've been driving nice and steady. Now let's hit the highway. We're going 100 miles per hour, and it's gonna get faster every damn page.
It's time to turn.
A little bumpy.
Yeah, Brennan, your turn, buddy.
All right. So I just finished this. I finished this last week, but since we've been off, I definitely want to take a minute to talk about it. Sundial by Catriona Ward. It comes out in March. And, obviously she got a lot of attention for The Last House on Needless Street last year. And I love that book. It was really great. It was very deserving of that praise. I like this one better. It's different. It's very different, but it also has, you're unsettled the whole time. You just know that there's more story than you're getting. And it feels like she just absolutely revels in just like dishing it out in these small spoonfuls until the last like 30 pages where the whole picture becomes clear and your mind just turns into a mushroom cloud. She's just very, very good at what she does. And maybe I'm wrong, but I can imagine that a book like this is written the way I would write a book, and just completely by the seat of my pants. This has to be meticulously plotted on note cards and all that shit. It's impressive though. The other one I'm about to start, and I know Patrick loved this book, is Manhunt by Gretchen Felker Martin, and I just got that in the mail today. I'm going to dive into it over the weekend, and I just hear this thing is a game changer. That it's it's fucking brutal, it's intense, and it's just it's written with balls.
King just tweeted about that, didn't he, Brian?
Yeah, I think he did.
Yeah, I read that because I put it on radar for me.
It's written by a transgender woman, and I bring that up because it focuses on the way I translated it was basic human rights with a lens of focuses on transphobia. It's a really good book. I think that it's a fever dream of 28 Days Later meets current issues on transphobia if it were to get as bad as it possibly can get. It's a good book.
Yeah, I'm gonna get that. The one I'm gonna start that just came out, and I can't remember the name of it. It just came out Tuesday, along with Chris Golden's book. It's like The Devil House or something like that.
Oh, that looks
John
like
Darnielle or something like that.
Yeah. I have a copy of that coming, so that's probably next up for me.
I know nothing about that book, but the cover looks like it is from the 70s, and I'm sure that's by design, but that would make me want to buy it.
Yeah, that's pretty much why I did buy it.
So Brennan and I, with Unburying the Dead with Ken McKinley, we're diving in. We just finished The Exorcist. That comes out February 1st. We talked about both the book and the film. Before that, Rosemary's Baby. We did Burn Offerings, and I love Ken's kind of like leading the charge on this, but I love it because if you know what comes before, and this might be obvious, but if you're a good student, you're probably going to be a good teacher. And I apply that to writing because I see a lot of talk about new books, which is amazing. But let's take a moment to start to look at the older books that came before us. Like, why is The Exorcist, which, by the way, the film doesn't even come close to the book, in my opinion, but why is that book so influential still today? Rosemary's Baby and so forth, Burnt Offerings, I didn't know until Ken was telling us, was the inspiration for The Shining. And it connected ghost stories in the Victorian era, that type, to Stephen King and what he inspired. I never knew that. And I read Burnt Offerings, watched the movie, and I get it.
It's a crazy ass movie too.
Yeah. The pool scene, especially as a father, just that hit. Even it holds up. The movie holds up, but the pool scene alone is just tough to watch. So listeners, or maybe you're new to the show, we also have a website. It's called deadheadspace.com. We have reviews, articles by some guests as well. We also have a store. You can get my ugly mug if you don't know what I look like because you're listening to the show. That's fine. Go to deadheadspace.com, but you can get that mug on a coffee mug or a t-shirt. And next episode, they'll air February 7th. That's next Monday. It'll be with Ross Jeffrey. He is a fellow podcaster. He is also an author, and he is a lot of things that we're going to find out about. A very friendly guy amongst them. But this has been a great time, Rich. I just want to ask if you have... Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
No, I just said I enjoyed it. I appreciate you guys asking me back.
Oh, hell yeah. When we were talking about who do we want to try to get for the first guest of season 3, because I mean, at least for us, we try to make it like an event, if you will. Like it's someone that we're excited to have on. Not that every guest isn't awesome, but dig
that hole, Patrick. Dig that hole.
I'm gonna keep digging holes, baby. But we want to get you
back and watching.
So, Rich, I just wanted to ask so I can divert the attention away from my hole. If you have any final thoughts.
Nah, I've blabbed enough for one night. I just appreciate it. Next time I come on, I'm gonna drag my son on here so you get some good stories that I wouldn't tell. He did a podcast like, I don't know, probably a week and a half ago, and I walked in on him when he was doing it, and he was talking about me, and I just stopped, and I was like, "Son of a bitch, you better just stop."
I would love to have Billy on.
We'd love that.
Yeah, we would have fun together. So.
Well, if you guys want, maybe we can get you on later this year. That'd be cool.
Yeah, whenever you want, then we'll have some fun. But yeah, thanks for asking me back. Like I said, I enjoyed it, and an hour and a half doesn't feel like an hour and a half with you guys. So anything I can do to help you, just let me know.
That would be great. Yeah. Brennan, final thoughts there.
Yeah, I mean, as always, we are deeply appreciative of your time. We know you got writing to do. You probably have about 500,000 book plates to sign until your fucking wrist falls off.
Hopefully I'm
amazed you can.
Hopefully I finish this book. We'll see.
Manufactured arthritis.
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, you're a busy dude, and the fact that you can carve out an hour and a half for us, like, we deeply appreciate it.
Oh, my pleasure, man. Thanks again.
I echo Brennan. Rich, it's seriously an honor. I know you don't see yourself in the same lens. Few people do in life. See yourself in the same lens as a lot of people do, but you cannot argue the fact that Cemetery Dance is one of the world's biggest. I don't even know if it's indie, but publishers. They made a huge mark, and you're also in the the Stan canon now, so that's pretty damn cool. But you've also done a lot as a writer, and the most important thing is you have allowed your kids to remember. You've allowed your kids to be free, and you've allowed your child to want to be like dad. I would assume. I'm making bold assumptions right now, but he's a filmmaker and a writer, and that don't happen by accident. So you did the most important job in the world, and that was be a good father. Seriously, man. Like
best job you can have, man.
I follow you on social media, and you see him enough to know you love that both those boys. So we're a fan of you for all those reasons and more. Listeners, you got to check out Chasing the Boogeyman. Also check out Gwendy's Final Test. It's with Stephen King. God damn, if there's not a reason to read that book, I don't know. If Stephen King can't do it for you, I don't know what will. But you make choices in podcasts, folks. Thank you for picking us.